that mean? Well, what does quadratic mean?
Parabola.
Yes, it has the x squared in there to make the parabola. What else? Inequalities. Inequalities. Not equal. So what are the signs that... Yeah. So a quadratic inequality in one variable consists of ax squared plus bx plus c is, say, greater than 0, greater than or equal to 0, less than 0, or less than or equal to 0. Where, of course, a cannot equal 0. Why can a not equal 0? Not just because it just can't. What happens if a is 0? Then what would you have? You would have bx plus c, and what is that? A line. That's right. Okay. Solve x plus 2 times x minus 2 is greater than or equal to 0. So what does that actually mean? Well, let's think about this graphically, okay? Let's think about this graphically. Does anybody know, except multiplying it out, just roughly, could you make a sketch of what this looks like? You should be at this point. It's a parabola, and it has x-intercepts at -2 and +2. And which way is it opening? Up. So it looks something like that. I'm just saying roughly, right? Okay, and what does this greater than or equal to 0 mean? What does that mean, though? It's basically, it's starting at 0, and it's everything that's above, right? That's what greater than or equal to 0 is. I don't want to see anything else here, right? Essentially. So, what are some values that would, what's some values of x that would work? Okay, so I hear 4. Remember, this is 2 and -2, right? So I hear 4. So I'll put 4 down. Let's plug 4 in. What do we get? 6. What do we get there? And 6 times 2 is? 6 times 2 is? 12.
You can say 12. Don't say it.
And 6 times 2 is 12. And 12 is greater than or equal to 0, so 4 works. Okay, can anybody give me another solution? 6,000. Well, we could try 6,000. Would it work? -3. So if we plug -3 in the first bracket, what do we get? -1. And we put -3 in the second bracket, what do we get? -5. And so what's -1 times -5? +5, and that's greater than or equal to 0, so that works. So does everybody see that we could go on and pick ones? It's pretty easy when you know what the graph looks like, right? Okay, so we're going to use a number line to find all solutions to this inequality. Critical values are the value which makes the expression 0 or undefined. If you take calculus, this is actually a huge topic, critical values. And what we're going to be doing with this sign, it's called a sign diagram, S-I-G-N, not sign like cosine. And that's also huge. So, anyways, the reason why it's 0 or undefined is, do you see, 0 is a critical value because it kind of cuts it off between positive and negative, right? And why would undefined be a critical value? Yeah, that's the asymptotes, right? So you can't pass those asymptotes, so that's a critical value where things start changing. If you think about our tests, some of them look like this at the asymptotes, some of them look like that at the asymptotes, right? Anyways. So. Okay, so what are the critical values in this example here? What would make it? Yeah, what would make x 0? I mean, what would make the function 0? 2 and -2. It's the zeros of the quadratic, right? So we are going to put 2. Let's put 0 here. 1, 2, -1, -2. But these are the critical points here, -2 and 2. And I'm filling it in because technically our inequality has it equal to 0. So we would be including that starting spot where it's 0. Okay? So this is how the sign diagram works, is you don't need to really, like honestly all you need is the -2 and 2, and you just have to pick numbers in the middle, numbers on the left, numbers on the right, and figure out if it's going to be positive or negative. So the first example, I'm going to show all my numbers just so you can see where I'm getting it from, and then after that I might not. So if I go on the left of -2, so I could pick -3, -4, I could pick -10, I could pick negative infinity, something on the left, and plug it into here. Now, all you're looking for is to see if it's positive or negative, okay? So you don't actually have to calculate what it is, you just have to calculate whether it's positive or negative. So for instance, if I put in -3 in here, I could say, well, -3 plus 2 is -1. But really I don't care about the 1, I just care about that it's negative, right? And if I put -3 in here and I go -3 subtract 2, I don't really care it's -5, I just care it's negative. And in the end I care about it's a negative times a negative, so what does that make that product? Positive. So I put a plus sign above there. Meaning I don't have to test everything on the left of -2. It's always going to be positive. And if you think about this graphically, does everybody see on the left of -2, it's always going to be positive. It's not going to like turn back and become negative, right? It's a quadratic. Okay, so then again, you pick something that's in between -2 and 2. A lot of people, if it goes from negative to positive on the x's, they pick 0 because it's the easiest one. But you can pick whatever you want. You plug it in. Again, if I pick 0, 0 plus 2, again, I don't care it's positive 2, just that it's positive, right? And if I put 0 minus 2, again, I don't really care it's -2, it's just that it's negative. So what's a positive times a negative? A negative. So in this region, between -2 and 2, does everybody see it's negative? Yeah? And then pick a number, doesn't really matter, on the right of 2, so 3, 4, 10, 100, 1,000,000, you know, infinity. 4, let's put 4 in there. 4 plus 2 is positive 6. Again, I don't care about the 6, it's positive. And then 4 minus 2 is 2. Again, I don't care, it's 2, that's just that it's positive. And a positive times a positive gives me a positive. So then what you do after you do this sign diagram, I'm going to write it down, a sign diagram. Sometimes people think I'm talking about S-I-N-E versus S-I-G-N. This is a sign diagram because it's showing the signs in different intervals. So it follows that every x value in the interval, what and what will give you positive values. Where will it give you? So anything from here up to 2. So how would I write that? Negative infinity to -2. Do I include -2? Yes. Okay, so I guess, sorry, it does say positive here, and in this case I'll put and 0, because does everybody see that the original thing said an equal sign there? Yeah. So I'm going to include -2 because it could be equal to 0 at -2. It is actually. And where does it start up again? Yeah, 2 to infinity. Sometimes you'll see some teachers say, oh, it's like from here to here and here to here. That's what you're looking for. But you don't need to draw that on there. You just need to come up with this answer, right? Okay, so and every x interval between what and what will give me a negative value? Yeah, and do I include -2? No, this time I'm not including -2, and I'm going from -2 to 2. Because at 2 it'll be 0, right? So I'm not going to include it. Therefore, we only need to check one value in each interval. The solution to the above equation would be stated as, If it's just these two regions, how do I actually write my final answer? Negative infinity, negative 2 square brackets, and how do I join them together? The union symbol to infinity. There you go. What do you think about that? Okay, so what's the procedure? Okay, so this is the steps. I put in a like a nice box here. So if you do your homework tonight and you forget how to do it, go back to this. This is now doing the steps for you. So set one side of the inequality to 0 and factor the other side. Notice in my example it was already factored for you and it already had a 0 on the other side. So why do we want 0 on the other side? Because we need to factor to find the critical values. The critical points of the expression. Determine the zeros or the critical points of the expression and plot on the number line. So, if the critical values have an inequality that's just a less than or a greater than sign, am I going to use a round bracket to include it or to not include it, or a square bracket to include it? A round. And if it has the equal sign, we are going to include it so it is a square bracket. Test one of the values. So actually, I didn't actually do that on there. I actually had a point filled in here. But what that is saying is you should actually put a round bracket or square bracket there. I actually like doing the dots filled in or not filled in. So maybe I'll add that there. Use a point not filled in, an open circle, and then a point filled in would be like that. That's supposed to be actually, there you go. Okay, then what we did, we tested one of the values of x in each of the intervals to determine the sign of that region. And then determine the interval for which the test values satisfy the inequality. So you're looking where is a positive and 0, or just positive, or negative and 0, or just negative. Okay, let's do the next example. Oh, this looks like the same example, except what's different this time? It doesn't have an equal sign and it's also less than. So what's the first step? You need to have the inequality with 0 on one side, and then you have to have it factored. So that's already done for you. Then we're going to plot the zeros on the number line. So in this case, I'm not going to plot all the numbers like last time. It's too much work. We're just going to put positive 2 and negative 2 on there. And then you need to tell me whether I'm going to use an open circle or a closed circle there. Yes, I'm going to put an open circle there, which means in the end, my answer will not include those numbers. It'll have round brackets. Does everybody understand? Because it's not equal to 0. Okay, so then, now we're going to pick numbers on the left of negative 2. So again, it doesn't matter. You don't even have to show me what number you pick. Just, at this point, you could probably do it in your head. So mostly, like honestly, most people just pick the next number, so negative 3. So negative 3 goes in there. What do we get? We get negative 1. So negative. Again, you don't actually have to calculate the number, just whether it's negative or positive. So if I put negative 3 in there, or negative 10, it doesn't matter. I'll get negative in that bracket. Are you getting that? I get negative? Okay, if I put negative 3 or negative 10 or negative 100, what do I get in this bracket? Negative. And then these brackets mean times them together. So what's a negative times a negative? A positive. Okay? So now again, if you go between negative and positive, usually people will test 0, but you don't have to. You just have to pick a number between. Like you could pick 1.1. Why would you pick that? But, but you could. Okay, so then let's just put 0 in. 0 goes in here. Do I get positive or negative in this first bracket? Positive. And if I put 0 in here, do I get positive or negative? Negative. So then if I get a positive times a negative, what do I get? A negative. Again, I'll pick something on the right of 2. I could pick 3, I could pick 10, I could pick a million. Let's do a million. A million goes in here. What do I get for the first bracket? Positive or negative? Positive. What about here? Positive. So a positive times a positive gives me a positive. Do I have to refresh your memory on products of negatives and positives? What do you get? You guys know, like same sign positive, different sign negative. Okay, good. So what's our solution? Our solution is, where are we looking here? It says here, I'm looking where it is. That's our area we're looking for. So how would we write this in interval notation? Yeah, so do I put a round bracket or square bracket on negative 2? Round bracket on negative 2, and it goes up to 2. There's my answer. So, that's my answer.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess the thing is the sign and the textbook might use a different technique to get the positives and negatives, but in the end, you just have to come up with a way to get where it's positive and negative, and then your answer will be the interval where that happens. Does that make sense to you? That's underneath the x-axis, yeah. Yeah, like in this case, do you see from negative 2 to 2, that's where it was below the x-axis. So visually, that's what it looks like. Okay. So does everybody see? In this case, it already is solved with 0 on one side. Good. You can check that off. The next step is to what? Factor. So let's factor it. What do we get when we factor it? X. Yeah, x minus 5, x plus 4. Okay, hopefully that will be no problem for you. You know what the good news is in all of these? They're all factorable. Yeah. I know, that would be good news for you. Okay, so do we put a point filled in or not filled in? Filled in. Why is it filled in? Because it has the equal sign, yes. Okay, and where do I put numbers? Not 4, negative 4 and positive 5. And I put a point on there filled in. Yes? Because you're setting it equal to 0 and solving. It's like when we're solving the zeros. We're technically solving the zeros, so it's kind of like I'm doing a new question here. Say the equation is y equals x minus 5 times x plus 4. And I have to find the x-intercepts. You would set y to 0, right? And then in order to get a product of 0, that means these factors have to be equal to 0. So back in the day, we actually wrote it out and we said x minus 5 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0. We moved it over and we got x equals 5. And x equals negative 4. But I don't think anybody's really at that point where we do that anymore. We can just, once it's factored, we can see what it is, right? Okay, so what's the next step? Yeah, pick something on the left of negative 4. So what do you want to pick? Negative 5. So don't put it in there. Put it into the factored form, because all we need to do is look at the signs that way. Yes? It's a lot more work, and you don't want more work, right? You actually, if you put it in the non-factored form, you actually have to calculate it. When you put it in the factored form, you just have to look for the sign, which is way easier, right? It is a non-calculator test, yeah. So negative 5 goes in here. What do I get for the first factor, positive or negative? What's negative? Because negative 5 and negative 5 make negative 10, negative, right? So negative 5 goes in here. What do I get? What do I get there? Negative. So then I get a negative times a negative. So what do I get? A positive. Okay, what's the number between negative 4 and 5? What's the number between negative 4 and 5?
Negative 4.
4, 0, negative 2. It doesn't matter. Just pick one. Plug it in. What do we get? Positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative. Plug one of those numbers you said into here. Do I get positive or negative? Positive. So I have a negative times a positive. So what does that give me?
Negative.
Negative. Okay. We're going to pick a number that's on the right of 5 on the number line. I could pick 5.1 if all you cared, right? 6 is nice, sure. 6 goes in there. What do I get? I get positive. Okay, I get positive 1, but I get positive. And what do I get over here? Positive. What's a positive times a positive? A positive. Okay, what am I looking for? What area here?
Middle part.
What does this sign right here mean? So what's greater than 0? Positive or negative? Positive. So it's this and this. So how do I write that? My solution is negative infinity, and we can't include negative infinity. Why? Yeah, it's not an actual number to encapsulate it. It's just a concept, a feeling. Anyways. You can't touch it, right? Okay, negative infinity to what? Negative 4. Do we include negative 4? Yes. Union. Then 5. Do we include 5? Yes. To infinity. And then that's my answer.
Can we watch the history?
Okay, next up. What's the first step we have to do here? We have to have it a 0 on one side, right? Move this over. So we get x squared, so I'm just going to put an arrow. X squared plus 5x. What happens when you move a minus 6 over to the other side? It's a plus 6. Greater than 0. Then what do? We factor it. So I'm going to put a little arrow and I'm going to factor it. What is it factored? Yes, x and x. That would be a good step. Yeah, 2 and 3. So plus 2 plus 3. Oh, so what are we going to put on our number line? Do I put negative 2 first or negative 3 first? Negative 3 first, people. Okay, you guys know a number line goes from least to greatest. It's not whatever you choose. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to, what are we looking for here? Do we have an equal sign there? No, so these are open circles going through there. It looks like a circle with a line through it, but anyways, doesn't matter. Okay, let's pick a number on the left of negative 3. It would have to be negative 8 if you're... Okay, negative 8 goes into the factored form. What do we get there? Negative or positive? And what do we get here? Negative. What's a negative times a negative? It's a positive. Okay. What's the number between negative 3 and negative 2? Yeah, most people say negative 2.5, and there's always the person that says negative 2.1. It's all good. Pick negative 2.5. What do we get in the first factor? A negative, right? And what about the second factor? Positive. So what's a negative times a positive? A negative. Okay. What about on the right of negative 2? You could choose negative 1, you could choose 0, you could choose positive 10. Who cares? What are we going to get? Positive times a positive is a positive. What are we looking for here for a solution? Positive. Does everybody see we're looking for positive? Why am I looking for positive? Because it says greater than 0 right there. Yes? Okay. So, What's my answer? 2? Not including -3. Union. -2, not including -2. To infinity.
Yeah.
And it's open because it doesn't have an equal sign in the inequality. Okay, I want you to try example 5 by yourself. Go, do it. 2x and x, 3 and 1. I need a -6, so negative plus. So did you get your zeros to be -1/2 and +3? Yeah, it's -1/2. Okay, so what's on the left of -1/2? Did you have a question? Okay, so on the left of -1/2. Oh, first off, do I put a point filled in or not filled in? Filled in. So negative on the left of -1/2 would be, say, -1. Sometimes it's easier to pick really big negatives, like -100. Then you would know it's very obvious I'm going to get a negative out of it, right? Than actually calculating. And -100, it would be very obvious you're going to get a negative. So again, I get a positive there. 0 goes in there, I get positive, negative, so I get a negative. 4 goes in there, I get positive, positive, so I get a positive. What am I looking for here? It's less than or equal to 0. So what am I looking for? This region. So what's my answer? -1/2, square brackets, 2, 3, square brackets. Done. What do you think?